How's it going, guys? I'm Robert from Machado Visuals, and welcome to Gearside Chat. Now, this is kind of a new series I'm sort of experimenting with, and I've always kind of wanted some sort of ongoing dialogue between myself and you, the audience. So part of that is because I've been getting busier, and I'm pretty thankful for that. And with that busyness, my time is starting to get a little bit more valuable. So doing a live stream is way easier than producing a video. With videos, I'm able to obviously pack a lot more info into that video. So that's where this new kind of live streaming format comes in. And live streaming is more relevant than ever. So why not hop on that train? If you've been following me long enough, some of you know that I used to do a podcast, RIP, and that fizzled out actually pretty quickly. But this is hopefully going to be filling that void, and I would love to start incorporating guests into the mix, similar to a podcast, but in more of a live stream format. I know a couple other channels are starting to do more streams, like C47 and Pro AV. So this is just maybe my spin on that. And in terms of future plans, I'm just hoping to discuss, standard industries, what it's like to be in the industry, and relevant topics such as, whether it be new gear that I'm getting, unboxings, even live demos, whether it be gear that I personally love using and how I use it. I can actually physically show you during stream, and if you have any questions on it, I can obviously answer them with some sort of immediacy. So I want to use this as an interactive form where we can just talk about the industry. Audio is out of sync, 500 millisecond. Thank you, Michael and Dante. Let's see what we can do about that. You gotta love live production. Let's see here. Let's go into here. Christoph, I see your question. I'll get to that in a sec. Let's see. Is this any better? Maybe. What's up, Jamie? And obviously this, we'll figure out the sync issues as we go along. But let me know if this is any better or if it's worse. I don't know. It actually might be worse. I'm feeding actually into two different sources. So I have my camera feeding into, my camera is actually the a7S, feeding into my laptop. And then I'm using a separate audio interface. So that's probably where the delay comes from. Can I smell what the rock is cooking? Yeah, it smells great. All right, well, anyways, the purpose of this, at least first episode, is to kind of give my thoughts on the a7S III. And I've had a little bit, I've honestly been working a little bit, actually not a little bit, I've been working a lot, so I honestly haven't been able to use it as much as I've wanted to this week. But I did get a chance to use it last night. My friend owns his own little kind of artisan pop-up pizza shop, so I was hanging out with him, shooting some good people and some good pizza. I am using OBS for this stream. I'm actually using the Streamlabs version of OBS. Any word on the audio sync? Again, I'm not sure there's much I can do about it at this point. I do realize there's probably going to be a little bit of a delay, but if it's not like too distracting, I'll probably just work with it. Audio mixer, audio events, add 500 to my audio source. Let me try that. 500. All right, now it's at 500. Did that do anything? Is that better? Actually, let me see what this looks like. Yeah, that looks worse. Maybe I might be able to fix this if I feed right into my actually, I'm not sure. So is that an actual fireplace? It is lit. It is an actual fireplace. But that's up to you to decide whether or not it's actually lit behind me. But it is lit. Is audio worse? I added 500 milliseconds to my audio source, but I don't know if that's doing me any favors right now. Very interesting. Man, live streaming is weird. Live streaming's tough. Live streaming on a Mac is tough. Let me put it that way. Yeah, I'm wondering if I can sort of bypass the audio and just go straight from my, let's see, stereo out. I don't know if I have the right cable for that. Is that better? Oh, it's better now. Okay, thank you. Well, awesome. Thanks for letting me know. Yep, I think that was it. So if it sounds good, great. Awesome. Thanks. If you guys didn't say anything, I would have had no idea. All right, cool. So yeah, a7S III, it is incredible. As you have all seen by now, of course you guys know. It is everything I've wanted in a camera. The bit depth, the color, the slow motion, the ergonomics, it's so nice to use, and in a lightweight body. When I was filming last night, I was filming with my buddies over at Yukon Pizza, and almost after every shot, I would look at playback, and my mind kept blowing like over and over again, just of the quality that's coming out of this little body, and it's incredible. And the newer media, not to mention this newer media, I finally got my cards in last night, or yesterday rather. The new CFast Express Type A. This is what that looks like. Look out, they're tiny. They're so tiny. And then when you compare it to a SD card, there you go. It's super tiny, and it almost feels it has a little bit more robustness than SD cards have too. If you guys ever use XQD cards, it feels like a really, really small XQD card, like a really, really tiny XQD card. And not to mention, it's super fast. It advertises 800 read, 700 write, but what I've seen is more like in the 650s, in the 650 read and write. So, I mean, either way, that's still faster than a typical SSD. So I can transfer. Like last night, I was transferring some of the footage, and I transferred 100 gigabytes of data in like 3 minutes. It's wild. So that's why I'm a huge fan of this newer media. Yes, it is like super expensive. I think they're like what, $400 a card. But at the same time, like that's like XQD cards were about the same price, and those were 128 gigs, and they didn't even go as fast. And now they're just old. Now these are like what, over 200 megs faster than XQD cards, and they're even smaller. So I'm really happy that they've kind of implemented faster media. But with that though, I've also noticed that when I use my I've had these cards for over 2 years, these old the UHS-2 cards. There you go. And I've used these with my A7R III for the past few years, and they claim a 300 read, 300 write, and I usually get that. It's usually about 250, but these won't work in like 90% of the recording rates for the A7S III, which is it was kind of annoying because I have a bunch of these cards, but I was pretty much limited to, like, I couldn't even do XAVC SI in 1080. I think I can't even remember, but I remember about 50%, like more like 70% of the recording modes, I wasn't able to use these cards. So that was a little bit annoying, but it's all been fixed now that I have the CFast Express Type A cards. So current A7 III owner, debating on getting A7S III, jump to FX9, or hold off and wait for the FX6. So, I mean, it depends. Mainly on what you're trying to shoot. And I'll say that a lot, because, I mean, ultimately it does. For me, I've had a few jobs this week, and I've wanted to... for one of them, I really wanted to bring this, because normally I just bring out the FX9. And it's, just general corporate, talking head style work. And... like 99% of the time, I always bring out the FX9 because it's obviously a workhorse. There was one job this week. I wanted to bring out the A7S III, and I was super hesitant, obviously because it's a newer camera. I didn't want to be like caught with my pants down, like fiddling with it while I'm trying to set up a shot or whatever. But the one thing I always come back to is like internal NDs, and that for me is a huge selling factor of the larger bodies like the FX6 or FX9. And yes, you could of course use variable NDs or, I have matte boxes that I can throw on there. But I mean, kind of the point of this camera for me, the reason I love this camera so much is because of its form factor and its lightweight size. Like this, already out of the box, has more recording boards than the FX9, which is pretty wild. And the footage that comes out of this little guy is ridiculous. So I don't know. Maybe I just have to force myself off the deep end and just try it out for a job and just commit. So I would say it depends on what you want to shoot. There is something to be said about the FX9. Obviously with the NDs, having SDI output, that's huge, at least for me. I absolutely dread using HDMI cables when I have to. And using SDI, it's easier to get signals out for your monitors, for live streaming, etc. And what I've noticed too is in terms of dynamic range, I haven't done like a proper latitude test. I want to do one soon, but it seems like this camera, it seems like this camera crushes a little bit down in the shadows, and that's just pure speculation from what I've. The very non-clinical tests that I've done, just from shooting last night, it seems like the shadow. It seems like it doesn't have as much shadow information as the FX9. The highlights definitely, when you're not using a picture profile, the highlights definitely, obviously bloom a little bit sharper than using Cinetone. It would be cool if this camera had Cinetone, but yeah, I am interested in seeing what that FX6 has to offer. Not that I'm looking to get one, but I would love to try one out and see how Sony handles that situation, because this camera, the FS5 had 10-bit 422 in HD, but when you go up to 4K, it had 420 8-bit. But this camera now does 4K 10-bit 422. So how are they? I'm wondering how they're going to dumb that camera down enough to strike a good middle ground. I'm thinking there's probably not going to be time code again, and that's another huge thing. I love having time code on the FX9. Time code's a huge deal breaker for a lot of productions. Whenever you had to use the FS7 on productions, you would always need the extension back because it had time code. And when I first got my FS7, 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't have the extension unit because I didn't think I'd need it. I never used time code. I didn't care for it. And that actually cost me a fair amount of rentals too. And I didn't even know it at the time. If I knew that, I would have probably gotten an extension unit. But to me, I thought it was a $2,000 box that I didn't really need. But don't sleep on time code. Don't sleep on time code. So I don't think the FX6 will probably lack time code. I really don't know. It'll probably have Cinetone. It'll probably have autofocus, even though there's no autofocus buttons on the side of the camera. So, I don't know what they're going to leave out of that camera, because if it does not make sense to do 4K 8-bit now that the a7S III is out. So I would say, for me personally, the FS7 was and still is one of the most popular production cameras in the world, especially for doc and corporate, all that stuff. Hands down, one of the most popular cameras and most rented cameras, and that's why it's valuable having that caliber of cameras, because it's easily rentable, and that usually drives a lot of my purchasing decisions, is because it's whenever people travel or productions are coming into town or whatever, they're obviously looking for a camera package that they know and expect, and the FS7 checks a lot of boxes for them. So the FX9, the reason I hopped on that camera so quickly is obviously I'm a huge fan of the FS7, but also because eventually that camera is going to start to replace the FS7 in terms of rentals. And I've noticed, I had a job with Vice a couple months ago, and they asked specifically for Sony FS7 or FX9. It was the first time a production company had even mentioned the words FX9. So who knows how long it will be before the FX9 just totally replaces the FS7. The whole Sony's whole marketing with the FX9 to me is a little bit strange. They said that the FX9 is not replacing it, but like it is very obviously a upgrade, and I don't understand it. For me, I haven't touched my FS7 in a very long time since I've had the FX9. Would I still recommend an FS7 in 2020? Yeah, I would totally recommend the FS7. I will say though, I have been spoiled with FX9. There's a noticeable jump in caliber of camera between the two cameras that I've noticed. I've done a couple kind of like video portraits, and the level of quality jump from the FX9 FS7 is very, very noticeable to me, because I've obviously used the FS7 for years, and it's just one step closer to the Venice. And for me, I know the price gap is especially now is pretty big. If you can afford to wait to get an FX9, I would definitely recommend that. But that being said, an FS7 is totally a reasonable camera. It's still very, very relevant. And that way, if you ever move up to an FX9 down the road, you'll appreciate it even more. So I still have my FS7s. I haven't let go of them yet. They actually still do get rented fairly often. I had a 3-day rental for them a couple weeks ago, and I have maybe another week-long rental somewhere in October. But I do think it is still a relevant camera. But with the advent of all these new other, Canon's coming out with all these cameras, Sony's coming out with all these cameras, that camera is about 5-6 years old now, and not that I think that it's approaching the end of its lifetime, but it is a little bit of an older camera. What was your time code workflow when using cameras without time code? So I don't know if you've seen my video on tentacles. I did a video on my tentacles about maybe a year ago. Basically, that's my solution to time code. Basically, my universal solution to time code. It's how I use time codes on smaller cameras like the A7, the A7R III. It's what I've used. It's basically a little box that you can plug into, and it has a 1/8-inch line out into your camera, and so it records it. It almost sounds like a static, but it's actually what time code sounds like. So you can bring that in, and then certain software like Resolve, they can interpret that and then inject the time code into the file. So that's been my time code workflow. If you haven't seen my tentacle video, be sure to check that out. That's what I was thinking. There's two FX9s available in my city. There's a handful in Vegas right now, and it ultimately just depends. So I mean, the way I'm kind of approaching it right now in terms of, FS7, FX9 rentals, I'm thinking I might let go of my FS7s. And then if someone approaches me about asking for an FX, or if someone approaches me asking for an FS7, I'll just say, we don't have an FS7, but we do have an FX9. But then, that also introduces a lot of other, I would say, issues at the same time, because for me personally, and for a lot of other DPs, when you're looking to do a multicam shoot and when you're looking to rent multiple cameras, on multicam shows, you want a one-to-one match for cameras. So, like I always say, the best B camera is another A camera. So, if it were up to me, and if I had the choice between getting one FS7, like if I were traveling with a production and I had the choice, and I needed 2 cameras, and then I had the choice of using a FX9 and FS7 or 2 FS7s, I would choose the 2 FS7s. So yeah. You have to level assess. The sound on that fire is too good. Yeah, I got the fire in the back. It's up to you guys to determine whether or not it's real. Maybe I'll do another reveal, but I'm glad it's working out. Keem, what's up, man? Thanks for dropping by. Keem, man, when are we gonna start Twitch streaming? We need to have you as a guest at some point. Get you on here. I was saying earlier in the stream that I wanted to start incorporating guests and stuff like that, so you'd be a good fit for that. I'm looking to get a new camera mainly for narrative filmmaking, but also used for other things. Do you think it's worth it to get the a7S III or getting a Blackmagic 6K and save money? It's interesting with the a7S because the reason I hopped on the Pocket 6Ks was because of the image quality, and the Blackmagic RAW is great. It does ProRes. The Blackmagic has beautiful color science, but it's a pain in the ass to rig up. So I would take that into consideration when you're trying to decide whether or not to invest in either a Pocket or an a7S. With either camera, you'll need to invest a little bit more money in obviously accessories, and determining on how you want to rig it, what monitors you need, C boxes, D boxes, rail support, tripod, all that stuff. But I think I really like, and so that's why this camera is such because this basically is replacing the 6Ks for me, because of its form factor and ergonomics. Like, it's so much more usable out of the box, and I don't have to worry about, rigging up power, rigging up all these extra goodies to it. But at the same time, the image quality of the Pocket 6K is just incredible. So if you're thinking about doing just narrative stuff, the Pocket 6Ks would probably, you would save a little bit more money, obviously. I think the price did drop, but you do have to consider all the accessories you do need to actually rig it out. You'll definitely need power. You'll definitely need, I would personally get some kind of C box so I don't have to mess around with HDMI, but that's just personally. You'll definitely need power. You'll definitely need some sort of cage. I might lean towards the Pocket 6K. Let's see. What audio recorder am I using for talking head interviews? So it's interesting. For talking head interviews, I'm just going straight into camera with the FX9. The FX9, the preamps sound great. And for the type of talking heads that I do, it's usually like I'm usually handing it off to an editor, and it's just one less step I have to, because I'll obviously timecode sync all the sources, like my recorder and cameras and stuff like that. But if I can just eliminate that and just hand off, okay, here you go, audio's on channel 1, safety's on channel 2, peace. But that being said, if I did have to use an recorder, I do have a MISC Pre 6 that I would use as my kind of audio recorder. It's actually what I'm using for this stream right now. It's actually right here. It's got 32-bit float, which if you've never tried 32-bit float before, it's incredible. It's like basically raw for audio. It's pretty wild. With the Rode NTG3, I haven't actually used the NTG3. I've always used Sennheiser mics. I have the 8060, and for voices, it's got a really great it makes voices sound really great, and it has a lot of presence. And so for about 4 years now, that's basically the only mic I've ever used. I've never actually used Rode mics. My vote is not real, but I'll probably be second guessing myself soon. That's awesome. Michael, what's up, man? How's that new a7S? Man, congrats on the new cam. I'm excited for you. It is, that's, you got a killer setup. Throw another 416 on the fire if that dies down. There you go. We'll see. If the fire doesn't die down in about 45 minutes, then you'll know. Do I own a rental company? If so, is it accessible through a website? I don't own a rental company. Well, I mean, I guess myself, Machado Visuals is somewhat of a rental house, a very, very mini rental house. I'm not a rental company per se, but I am a owner-operator, DP, that just owns a crap ton of gear. So a lot of times producers will come emailing me, be like, hey, we need this. We need, we have budget for these crew members. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'll need to do my job, blah, 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 blah. And then in most situations, I'm able to provide everything because I do have a crap ton of stuff. Not that I would recommend it. I would only recommend it if you're able to actually rent those stuff out and use them a lot. Like, for example, the FX9, I've already paid for, I just got the second one, I would say probably maybe less than a month ago. And that was because I ran a report on my income for the FX9, and I've already made my money back in the middle of a pandemic in less than a year. So, and obviously the camera just came out. I got it in January, and I have another 5-6 years left in that camera. So it definitely helps owning your own gear, not only because you can obviously rent it back to yourself, but also whenever you want to do like stuff with friends or whatever. I've been using them a lot for YouTube, and now I'll probably start using the a7S a lot for YouTube. So there you go. Have you gotten your hands on the Aperture Nova? No, I haven't. You're getting one on Monday? Well, that's awesome. I really want to get my hands on one. I've not been able to try one out yet. If they weren't back ordered till the end of time, I probably would have brought one, honestly, because I do really want something in that form factor, because I obviously have the SkyPanel S60, which is great. I love it. I also rent that guy out a lot. It sounds very weird because I know Arri's very, commercial narrative-based company, but I use it a ton for corporate work. For corporate work, the SkyPanel is incredible. I'm able to go into any lighting, any ambient environment, take a reading with my color meter, which I don't have handy, take a reading and just one-to-one match the light color, and then just supplement it so then it looks like the interview's not even lit. And that should be your goal whenever you're lighting stuff like that. But no, I think one or two of my buddies does have a Nova, one of them in town, but I haven't met up with him yet to get my hands on it. That's awesome though. The Aperture has been killing the game lately. All their lights have been phenomenal. I'm being keyed right now with the 300D, the staple of YouTube filmmakers. And yeah, Aperture, I love this stuff. Let's see. I'm going to guess that there has to be an Aperture light in the back. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out. Maybe we'll find out in 45 minutes. I love all the interest in this the lighting set back there. But Michael, it's great so far. Going to look over my shots from today a bit, then do some controlled lighting tests tomorrow. That's awesome. That's super cool. Yeah, I was saying earlier that I've been, for the past 3 weeks for me, have been like super slammed. I've actually been doing a little bit more editing work too. That's how kind of busy I am, and I don't really edit. But I do, one of the first things I want to do with this new camera is do a latitude test and kind of compare that with the FX9. One thing that I'm very, very curious about is, as you know, in S-Log3, you can go all the way down to, I think it's 320 ISO, right? Or 640, 320. You can go lower than that, 160. You can go down to 160 ISO. So, in my opinion, and I need to test this. But what I'm thinking that's doing, because if the native ISO is 640, by going down 2 stops, I think that's similar to Cine EI on the FS7, FX9, whereas you're just kind of overexposing the image by 2 stops. So obviously, at that low of an ISO, the noise floor should be clear, but I'm thinking that you're doing that at the expense of your highlights. Again, I need to test that. I need to kind of confirm that, but that's just my theory. That's what's happening. But yeah, I also need to do some more controlled tests with that too. This is somewhat of a controlled test because this is being shot on an a7S III as well. Currently C200 owner, just picked up the a7S III and excited to use it. Curious what the FX6 is going to have. You and me both. May have to get rid of the C200 if it's similar to the a7. That's interesting. I always thought when the C200 came out, I always thought that was a really, really, really interesting camera. I always wanted to try one. I was never able to try one. Yeah, how are you liking the a7S, especially being a Canon user? I'm curious. Yeah, I'm looking, Michael. I'm looking to do a lot more tests with this camera. Obviously, the next few weeks are kind of freeing up for me, so I'm going to have a little bit more free time. Start focusing again back on the YouTube content. I haven't put out a video in a week or two. But yeah, this camera, it's great. It's basically, it's the a7S. It's crazy, and overall the menus. Actually, I could show you too. The menus have much, and Michael, I'm curious on what you think of the menus. The menus are super intuitive, and I never really complained about Sony menus. I know a lot of people love complaining about Sony menus. I personally, I never complained about Sony menus because if you use these cameras enough, you'll know the menus like the back of your hand. But that being said, these menus, I'll think about like what I want to change, and then I'll look to the side, and it's just super easy to navigate. And actually, I could probably show you if this works. Let's see this. There we go. So here, this is actually plugged in right now. So I'm sure you guys have all seen this. This is what the menu system looks like. So, everything is laid out it's very intuitive. You got shooting, a lot of the image parameters, exposure and color, autofocus, playback. I don't really use these two very much. And then just your general settings. So it's super, super intuitive, and I'm a big fan of what they've done to these menus. And I'm curious to see if this will be kind of a new standard for alpha cameras moving forward. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of those menus. The newer media, we went over this, but big fan of the newer media. Like, just everything new about this camera, I'm such a huge fan of. It's almost too intuitive for me. Using the A6500 almost daily for 4 years is so ingrained. Yep, and I feel like they just consolidate a lot of things and just, place them where they should be. So I'm a big fan. Let's see here. One of my favorite new features is the ability to import and export settings, similar to an all file on the FS7 or FX9. So actually, if I show you here, if I go into the menu, I'm able to go here, reset save settings, save load settings. I can either save these. So actually right now, I'll just go ahead and save these settings, and you can rename these settings. And so this is obviously great for me because I have 2 A7Ss. So if you ever use another one, you'll be able to basically just switch them really, really easily. Another thing I'm a big fan of this camera is the 1080, and like everyone loves 4K, everyone loves them some pixels, but the 1080 on this camera is so good. That was always the one thing I always hated about any other alpha camera is that whenever you jump down from 4K to 1080, there was a noticeable jump in image quality, and noise and aliasing, and it was just never a fun time. With this camera, it's just like the FX9 or FS7. The 1080 is, just as good as the 4K, honestly. And the company I do a lot of work for, they just delivered. They just always do 1080. They still do 1080. So having a camera that can actually do good 1080 is actually a big deal to me. How's the color science compared to previous Sony cameras? I think it's great. I feel like a lot of the older gen Sony cameras, they push really magenta. And I feel like just overall in general, the newer cameras starting from the FX9 push a little bit more towards green, which is great. I mean, I love it. I've noticed, especially the FX9, if you were on the live stream I did last week, you've probably noticed that the FX9 was significantly greener. And usually when I'll pull in a talking head interview into post, and I'll just throw on F709 just to see what it looks like, I'll definitely notice a huge green shift, which is easy to dial out. But even with that green shift, it's a very pleasing image. So I think that's the kind of direction Sony's been going, is they've been aiming for pleasing images rather than accurate images. So like right now, I'm shooting with straight up 0 picture profile. And yeah, I think it looks great. This is just standard no picture profile, and I think it looks wonderful. Let's see here. Another thing I'm actually really excited about this camera is the ability to customize file names. So if I go into here, let's see. I talked about those menus being easy. See if I can find this setting. Oh yeah, it's image quality, right? Movie settings. Nope, that's not it. File settings, duh. So you can actually customize the prefix, which is actually pretty cool. So I can set this to date or title, date and title, title and date, which is actually really cool. And I know I've been griping about the FX9 clip name format, but not updating the card number. But there is a workaround that I have been using through Hedge. I don't know if any of you guys know what Hedge is, but it's basically a backup software that I use to offload all my media. And I am planning on doing a video on that. I just need to shoot it. The a7S III, I think, does have HLG. To be honest, I haven't experimented enough with these picture profiles, which I probably should. So if I go down here, HLG 1, 2, 3, and just straight up HLG. So yes, it does have HLG profiles. To be honest, I never used HLG profiles. Not to say that, not because they aren't good. I just haven't had much experience with them. To be honest, with this, I mean, I'll probably end up playing with them when I go through all these picture profiles. But to be honest, I'm probably going to be using just straight up no picture profile for a while, because out of camera it looks so good. And whenever I need to bake in images for clients, they're usually not concerned with. They're usually not as concerned with dynamic range as I am. So there's that. Let's see here. So yeah, it's interesting with this camera as high quality footage as it puts out. It's interesting to think about what's the point of the FX9 for me, if this does basically everything that camera does. But I think there is something to be said about crew workflow and just simply interfacing with the camera. Again, I always come back to wanting internal NDs. And not that I expect these smaller Sony bodies to have internal NDs, but that is a huge deal for me, because if I'm lighting an interview against a window, or if for whatever reason you always need to mitigate exposure, And usually one of the best ways to do that is through NDs, especially for talking head stuff. I'm walking into an environment I know nothing about, and I need to mitigate exposure, which is why the C70, the Canon C70, looks really, really interesting, and I'm really excited to see what that camera does. It's a very boxy, kind of chunky form factor, but I kind of dig it. How much room is there to grade with no color profile? There's probably not a lot, to be honest. The 10-bit 422 probably does help. I did shoot some stuff. Actually, I wanted to try to put some of that up on the stream. It probably doesn't have a lot of room, but if I am shooting with no picture profile, I'm probably going to be trying to get it as close to perfect in camera as I can. So let me see this. I exported a quick little timeline earlier, and I'm just seeing if it will play back as intended. Stand by. Try VLC. So it's interesting. A lot of my clips did not. They just look like log. Anyways, what I can do actually, I'll go back into the camera view, and I actually still have a lot of the clips from last night up on the card. So for these clips, I think these are all S-Log, so I'm not quite able to show you what I did with the standard picture. I did probably about half in S-Log and half in no picture profile. So this is log. And I did shoot with Gamma Display Assist, but I don't think it outputs Gamma Display Assist through HDMI. So I'm going to assume this is a log picture. And I was for this, I think I was doing 4K 120. And it's interesting because I never really have ever used 4K 120. I've usually just always, I mean, obviously, because not a lot of cameras do that. But for my purposes, 4K 60 is just fine. But it is nice having the option because I've never been able to do quite that slow motion. I got some good old puppers action. And the ISO in these scenes are ranging a little bit. I usually try to stick with 640, but I would go as high as up to 2500. Let's see if I can find one of those. This might be 2500. And to me, just looking at the monitor, it doesn't look very flat. So I'm not sure. And like if you look at the shadows, there's not a lot of shadow like in those trees. So I would be interested in seeing what this looks like converted to Rec 709. It's kind of a fitting shot with the fire going on in the background. See if I can get it coming out. So I am planning on going back over to Yukon to get a little bit more footage, probably next week. That's actually one of the big things I want to do with this camera. I want to do kind of a mini/micro doc using these cameras primarily. Because people always love seeing how new cameras operate in real world scenarios. And doing a small documentary for these guys, I think would be a good fit. So I think I'll be able to record gyro data. I don't know on that one. Especially if you're using raw out, I don't know if that data will transmit over HDMI. So I don't know the answer on that one. Speaking of which, I do also, that's another thing I need to try. I do have a Ninja 5 sitting around that I do want to use. Let's see. Oh, this is a pretty good one. And again, these are all on the new CFast Express Type A cards. But yeah, it's just a really, really beautiful image, and especially when using S-Log3 with the detail turned all the way down. It just it gives just enough crispness to the image that I'm a big fan of. If you told me this was shot on a FX9, I would totally believe you. Let's see here. It's another good one, showing off the highlights. Another thing I did also notice is that when I did shoot with the no picture profile, I shot a scene similar to this. But when I pulled up the clip on my computer, the highlights were much more blown out than I remember. So I'm not sure if there's some display setting or some like kind of image brightness trickery going on there, but that is something I did notice. Let's see here. Again, gotta love fire in slow motion. It's cinematic. That's what it is. Let's see. So, yeah. Last night I was just kind of talking with the guys over at Yukon and kind of seeing what kind of direction that they wanted to go for the micro dock and kind of developing the story, the basis of the story. So, we can hopefully do something good with these cameras. And you know, again, going back to form factor. Obviously, this camera is very, very unassuming and small and light, which is why I love this camera so much, so that I don't need to lug around a huge, not that the FX9 is huge, but I can move around. It's very nimble. It's basically what I'm saying. There was a couple scenes where I was basically backed up right into a corner, basically against the wall, and I was shooting to my right, and now that this camera has a flip out screen, I was able to flip the screen and just shoot like this right against the wall. So ergonomics are huge. Big fan. So yeah, you know, going back to where does this fall in line with the FX9? The NDs and the SDI is huge. It's interesting when I'm out, because this stream is being shown at 30p, 2997. But when you output 30p on the a7S, it still outputs 5994. So I still need to use a cross converter and scaler. So like it's just small and like I would still have to do that with FX9 as well. But small things like that are obviously where you start seeing those noticeable differences. Also, the peaking on this camera is really, really, really good. I don't remember these smaller alpha cameras having such good peaking. It's very, very, very easy to pull focus. And like, I would say maybe half the time last night I was switching in back and forth between manual focus and autofocus. But when I needed to use manual focus, the peaking is phenomenal. Michael, I don't know if you're still in here, but let me know if you tried the peaking yet. And then now that the image quality is just about on par with the higher caliber cameras, with this camera when I'm using S-Log3, I am a little bit more comfortable with changing ISO. I've noticed. Like again, I was shooting up to 2500. I think I got up to 5000 for a few shots last night. I still haven't really dug into the footage yet. I've been just a little bit too busy, but with this camera, like that's something I would never have done with any other alpha camera, or even let alone the FX9, because we're using exposure indexes. But I am finally comfortable with kind of adjusting my ISO a little bit. And that's another thing that I want to test out with the latitude test. Like what implications does that have to dynamic range? So whenever I get around to doing that latitude test, I'll do it at a bunch of different ISOs and and see how that affects dynamic range. What would I use this camera for? I would use this camera for everything. Basically everything. Right now I'm doing a lot of corporate kind of talking head, not too much fun stuff. But what I would like to do is, since this camera basically is on par with FX9, I would love to see if, because right now whenever I travel out to a job with two FX9s, I'm traveling with this big hard case. It's 1600 series from Pelican. It's a big hard case, holds two bodies, and it's by no means huge, but it is big. With this camera, I can obviously fit two bodies, set of lenses, some audio gear, batteries, cards. I can fit all that into a small roller or a 1510. So what I will probably try to do in the next few months is I'll maybe try not phasing out my FX9, but I will start to probably use this more for talking head stuff. Obviously for YouTube, it's going to be, you've seen a lot of YouTubers switch over to this camera. So you could basically use this camera. To me, I'm going to be using this camera for everything. For the past couple months, I've been, obviously a lot more active on YouTube, and for all that content, I've been using the FX9s. I've been using, some pockets and stuff like that, but for the most part, I shoot on the FX9. So for YouTube, especially for me, I'm basically going to probably be using this camera. And we'll see, because I've kind of developed a nice little workflow using the FX9s. So again, we'll see. How accurate, color exposure-wise, is the display on the monitor and viewfinder? Again, when I was using the no picture profile, I was shooting the shot of the pizza, and to me on the monitor it was it looked great. But again, when I brought it in the computer, it wasn't terrible. It was blown out a little bit, but it was more blown out than I remember it being. But for the most part, other than that, for the most part, it does seem pretty accurate. And in terms of switching back and forth, I haven't really honestly used the internal viewfinder too much, because I haven't really needed to. But I think for the most part, they are pretty accurate. Let's see, on a commercial shoot. If I'm on a commercial shoot, I'm maybe not going to use this. I mean, it depends on the size of the commercial. I think that's another important thing to note, is scale. So if I'm shooting a big, commercial for, a bigger commercial, probably not going to use this camera. I'll probably have a little bit of a healthier budget to use something more like an FX9, or even, Red or Sony, something like that. But that being said, if I'm doing, some small form content for a small business where I don't necessarily need to bring all that out, these would be perfect. And that's another point too, is that's why I own so many cameras, is that so I can cater to a bunch of different markets. So that if a client comes to me and is like, hey, we want to do this commercial, this is our budget. Usually they don't tell me the budgets, but usually I'll send them a quote first. That's usually how it works. I'll send them a quote, and then they'll see the quote and be like, whoa, I don't even know what to say. Like, what the heck? I'm like, okay, well, all right, no worries. I have other gear. I can swap this out. So instead of maybe using two FX9s, I'll use two a7S2s. So usually I'll rent FX9s for $500 a day, maybe $600 it just depends on whether or not I'm including lenses. So if you're talking about two camera packages, that's minimum $1,000 a day. That's not even including my rate. For these guys, I'm probably going to rent these out at maybe $150 per camera, $150, maybe $175 per camera. You're talking, around a fifth of the cost for just cameras alone. So again, I think it depends on the scale of the commercial, or scale of the project for that matter. And that'll kind of that usually determines what camera I bring out. What is my favorite glass to use with the Sonys? It's a good question. I've been loving the Sony 24, this little guy. It's very small, very lightweight, but has a wonderful, wonderful... a lot of people actually love this lens. But for talking head stuff, I've actually been using the Zeiss 35 1.4 and the 50-1.4. And for talking head interview stuff, that's what I've been leaning to a lot. And those are probably my two favorite lenses right now. Maybe more so the 50. I love me a good 50. Right now, this is on a 55, the Zeiss 55. And then in terms of other glass, it's interesting. Since I got the FX9, I've started to invest a little bit more in Sony glass, because before this year, I've never owned Sony glass. So I have like the 24-70. The 24-70 is good. 7200, obviously very good. 16-35. 16-35 is really, really fun when you're doing Steadicam or gimbal stuff. But in terms of favorites right now, I would say maybe the 24. And not that I'm a vlogger, but using that with the a7S III is a very vloggable combo. And then, yeah, the 35 and 50. Looked back and forth between the built-in monitor and 502 and was very impressed with the accuracy. Might be more likely to ditch an external monitor when running and gunning. Yep, like last night, I did not use an external monitor at all. And again, I keep going back to ergonomics. Like I always try, like feel like right now as I get older, less is more. So with all these, like with FX9, it's pretty much stock. I'm using the stock viewfinder. I have the wooden camera K, the top plate, and a couple other accessories to improve the ergonomics. But I'm not using an external monitor, and for this guy, I'm not even using an external monitor. I've just been using the built-in one. Now we'll see how long that lasts. If I use this a little bit more with for my corporate work or whatever, I do see the benefit in that in just trusting color and trusting exposure. I don't know that I would trust the built-in monitor completely, because if I'm able to have the option of using a calibrated 50 whatever 703, 503, I'll usually choose that. But for now, I'm gonna be using this camera basically as is, and that's kind of the beauty of it. Like I don't see myself putting a cage on here. I don't see myself using external monitors. And even I have the K3M audio multi-shoe interface for full-size XLR if I need to. So again, I don't see myself rigging this out and using a bunch of accessories. Is that around the price you would rent the Pocket 6K? Yeah, so exactly. That is probably the price that I rent out my 6Ks. It just depends on how rigged out they are. And obviously the 6Ks are at a lower price point than the a7S, but I did need to invest a little bit more because, as I said earlier, it's a pain in the ass to actually rig out to make it actually usable. So at the end of the day, these two the 6K and the a7S prices are around the similar, so I rent them for a similar price. Have I dabbed with any Anamorphics? Thinking of renting out the Atlas Orion. I've not lately. Actually, I did maybe a little bit last year, but as of recently, I have not used a ton of Anamorphics. I know a ton of people use the Atlases. They're a very nice kind of modern-looking anamorphic, and yeah, they look great. I do like the appeal of kind of vintage anamorphic because, for me, anamorphics have more of a vintage quality, have more of a characteristic look that is kind of reminiscent of, an older time. So, and it's interesting to see what the Atlas Orions have done. It's a very kind of modern looking anamorphic. Yeah, no, they're great though. They're great. Let's see. What else? Yeah, so I mean that's pretty much all I had. Unless you guys have any specific questions, I'm curious if it doesn't look like that fire has died down. So maybe it is an actual. Maybe it's practical or maybe it's not. How hesitant do you think clients will be to the a7S? I don't think they'll be very hesitant at all. It's interesting because a lot of the work that I do personally, I'm able to bring whatever. For a lot of the corporate work I do, I'm able to bring whatever I think would be best for that job. So I think I'm more hesitant than the client is because the client's just more so trusting me. in terms of image acquisition. So whether that means I bring a a7S or FX9, Pocket 6K, FS7, whatever, I think that's more so up to me. But that being said, from what I've seen so far with my own two eyes, just playing back footage on this camera, the image holds up. The image holds up very, very well. And again, if you were to tell me that this was FX9 footage and I was just watching it, I'd be inclined to believe you. I'm very, very excited to, especially for documentary work. Obviously, the FX9 is FX9, FS7's very documentary-centered cameras. So having this as a perfect B camera, or even A camera for that matter, just having all that power in this small, nimble package. I don't know how many of you have, covered live events or whatever, but there have been times where I have been out shooting and the client has been like, okay, well, maybe you could grab out there, if you go out there and maybe grab some B-roll of this event or this. And I've kind of like just internally dreaded that, like, okay, well, I've already got some of that. Well, I'll go out again. It's fine, whatever. And I'll have to go out with usually, a big rig. And the FX9 is nice because it's, slimmed down a lot. But I feel like I won't feel a lot of that with it. Like if you told me to go out and shoot some B-roll just with this little guy and a lens, like I'm not going to be mad. I don't think I'll ever be mad. So yeah, there's that. Would I ever rent a Venice? I would absolutely rent a Venice. I've actually been wanting to do that for a while. I am planning a series next year that I don't want to talk about yet, but I do think I'll be renting the Venice for that. I think it'll be an all Sony show, complete with FX9s, a7Ss, and I think for a camera, I think I'm going to be using the Venice. It's interesting. I'm always going back and forth, because obviously I have a ton of cameras available to me, but thinking down the line in terms of like what camera system would I want to get into eventually, whether that be Arri, it's probably not going to be red, or to me at this point it'd either be as Venice or an Arri, and whether that be a Mini, a Mira, or next year they're coming out with another Super 35 camera. I always go back and forth because again, going back to the FS7s and its rentability, that camera, the FS7s have paid themselves back so much because people always ask for them. I feel like not a lot of people ask for Venice, only because if you choose to use the Venice, like you're not looking to match other cameras. There are plenty of productions that always come into town. They'll generally be on minis. So I really, if I in a perfect world, if I were buying a new camera, it's really hard because I really want a Venice. I love the full frame. I love what Sony's done with that camera. Obviously the color science, the one-stop NDs, and the image quality is phenomenal. And with that, paired with the lenses that I have Vista Primes, which obviously cover VistaVision, cover kind of large format. I think it would pair really, really well. One of my favorite combos is a Venice with Supreme Primes, and I feel like the Tokina Vista Primes kind of give a kind of similar look to the Supreme Primes. So, the Venice with Tokina Vista Primes I think would be a very, very pleasing look. And obviously this depends on a per project basis. I don't think it would be right for everything. But I think the Venice is a really, really cool camera that I would obviously love to own. But that being said, I don't know how rentable it would be as compared to a Mini. So, the Mini is a little bit of an older camera. It's about maybe 6 years old, I would say. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's interesting. It's just interesting navigating as a business owner. What you can do to see a good return on investment. So, how editable are the files that come out of the a7S III? So, I don't know if you heard, but yeah, I've been using these newer cards, and for me, I've been using just all last night. I was using the XAVC SI codec, and that's probably just what I'll just use forever. For me, I don't like compromising, so I'll generally, if I can shoot an all-intro codec, if I have the option to, I always will. And just playing them back I was able to play them back on my laptop and just scrub through them super easily. So when I'm using the XAVCS-I codec, it was fine. It was perfect, even on my laptop. And granted, this is, a little bit more of a spec'd out MacBook Pro, but I was able to scrub through them super easily, and I didn't have any issues. I'll probably try seeing how the more compressed codecs are, the HS and the S codecs. But since I have this newer media, I don't think a lot of people are springing to purchase this new media simply because of how expensive they are. But for me, I personally love. I can appreciate new media simply just because of its performance. Like if you tell me if I shoot a whole day on a 160 gigabyte card and I need to transfer it to a drive at the end of the day, I can transfer this whole thing in minutes as opposed to hours. And that's also another thing too, like using SSD. Like if you're on a job and a producer's, you're working with a producer, try to convince them to buy an SSD because you'll gain so much back in time. I try not to ever use just regular external hard drives simply because they're so slow. So lately, to be editing, I've been using the Samsung T5 or T7. This is the newer kind of version of the T5. These go at like up to 800 megabytes per second. These are super fast. So I can just dump straight to here with no bottlenecks. And this is a terabyte. So I can, using this to transfer to my desktop, it takes, all of 10 minutes for an entire project. So I love it. How is AF using an adapter? That I have not tried yet because I've a bunch of Sony options now. That is one thing I will try. I am planning on doing a a7S kind of initial impressions video, kind of basically what we went over in this Gearside. So that's something I will try. I have not tried using an adapter. I do have the Metabones ones. I know there's like the Sigma MC11s and a couple other ones, but I will try using the Metabones and see how that works. I'm spoiled by B-Raw, recording straight to the SSD. Yeah, I was spoiled with that for a while too, and I loved using an external hard drive. And I love it. It's mostly, well, the capacity is also another thing. Like when you're using the Pocket, the using SSDs as the only kind of cost efficient option for media. So it's nice having those faster speeds just simply for transferring at the end of the day, which is why I love these newer smaller cards. And also, obviously you get access to all the recording modes. But yeah, it's nice having SSDs finally be a little bit more standard in the industry now. And again, I think it'll probably still take a few years because producers are still handing off regular, older, slower hard drives to me. But if they do that, if I shoot a whole project at the end of the day and they give me one of those drives, I'll straight up be like, listen, I'm gonna either A, do this at home, or A, do this at home, because if we sit here and wait for all these files to transfer, it's gonna take literally hours, and I'm not trying to do that. So yeah, I'll usually try persuading them into buying SSDs. Let's see here. Any thoughts on where the a7S series is now that Canon has rolled the C70 and eventual series in that form factor? Yeah, so the C70 is basically a souped up a7S. At a glance. In that it's obviously much beefier, but then I'm always going back to ergonomics. Like it's got the built-in NDs, it's got a mini XLR, which isn't my favorite, but at least it has XLR. It'll be really interesting to see how those cameras go toe to toe. I would whenever that camera does come out, I would probably be interested in renting one just to have some thoughts on it. I'm really, really intrigued by that camera. And if I were in the market, if I were looking to upgrade from something, I would have two eyes on that camera. It'll be interesting to see how the A7S series moves forward. I really hope they don't just start a pixel war and going into 8K and all that nonsense. I think right now they have a very, very, very good 4K, and really that's all you need. You generally don't even need that, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see how not only the A7S series, but it'll be interesting in seeing where the alpha cameras in general go, where the A7R cameras go, where the 6000 series go, because this camera has all these incredible features, which I'm hoping they make a standard. So I don't know, we'll see. And now I'm hearing rumors about a C50. So, and then you have the FX6 coming along. So it's like, Canon and Sony just left and right. And I'm here for it. It's great having accessibility and having all these options nowadays. I think there's no better time to get into this industry than now. I remember when I was back in film school, our options were basically like a Panasonic GH4. That's basically what I used throughout film school, and like a Canon 5D Mark III. So I think now there's so many great options to consider. So what FPS am I streaming in? Am I green screening? No, I'm not green screening. This is a practical set, and I'm streaming in 30 frames per second. I like 30 because for live kind of applications, I think it fits live scenarios a little bit better. I obviously love shooting in 24, but this isn't that cinematic experience. So for live applications, I'll generally do 30 frames per second. Let's see. Yep, that's a good point, Michael. That having a lot of capacity is very nice for your media, but it also is also very dangerous. You don't want that card or drive to go bad. If that's it's a little bit dicey. So that being said, it might make more sense because I have the 160 gigabyte variant of these cards. It might have made more sense to go with the 80 gigabyte version. But that being said, also the 10-bit 14, the XAVC-SI codec is very, very flavorful and has a lot of information in it. So I think I can get about an hour in just doing 24 frames per second. I think I can get like an hour and 15 minutes off this 160 gigabyte card. So it's got a lot of data. It's got a lot of bits to push around. But yeah, there's that. If I got the 80 gigabyte version, it would obviously been half that. 1 terabyte in A7S 3 Ninja 5 Pro is like 30 minutes. Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't played around with my Ninja 5. I honestly haven't touched it in a long time. So, and is that I'm assuming that's ProRes RAW. So if I do end up messing with that a little bit, I'll need to hop back into Final Cut, which is not my favorite. I did try opening up Final Cut a few weeks ago just because I was interested in, obviously Final Cut, Apple, I edit on a Mac. I was interested in seeing that optimization, but I don't know, maybe I was just too impatient to learn. But also, I noticed, and I don't know how many of you, actually, let me know in the chat what you guys are editing on right now. I've been editing on Resolve for the past year and a half, probably, and I love it. One thing I noticed with Premiere is that, or not Premiere, Final Cut, is that you have the option to transform all your footage from log, there's a log like a color space transform from log to like Rec 709, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it, so I was just like, all right, I'm going back to Resolve, so it'd be interesting. This is cinematic AF. I love it. I need to make shirts or stickers or whatever. #cinematic. ProRes RAW. Yeah, I haven't messed around with it. I know that's also a very flavorful codec. But it is pretty cool what you can do with the highlighted information, what I've seen online. So I am interested in messing around with that. There you go. Secret sauce is in the shutter speed. I love it. Do I prefer 24 or drop frame? Yeah, usually, I mean, it depends on the project, but 99% of the time I'm using 24 frames per second. I'm just a big fan of the look. Some people don't like it. Actually, one person doesn't like it. It's MKBHD who doesn't like it. Some people think it's choppy. I don't. You know, you watch a movie like 1917, you're not going to say, oh, God, that looks choppy. It's like, okay. Resolve Studio for almost 3 years. Resolve is king. Yep, I love Resolve. Yeah, I finally switched. I made the switch, and I've not looked back. I do still use After Effects, though, for a good amount of graphics work. Like the company I do a lot of work for, they're having me edit now. That's how they're slammed they are. Is now they're having me edit, and it's, you know, smaller things. It's nothing too crazy, but usually for graphics and like lower thirds, they'll send over an After Effects file, and you know, I'll just edit it myself. So I do still have, and I do use Acrobat, and I really want to let go of my Creative Cloud subscription, but I just can't because I do still use a good amount of Adobe products. Like I use Photoshop. I don't use a lot, but I'll use it maybe a few times a week. I use Adobe Acrobat actually a lot, just handling documents, and when people send me onboarding paperwork for production, like I'll generally use Acrobat. So it's tough. I've gone to the unsubscribe page so many times for Adobe, and I every single time I get there, I just can't do it. So I love Resolve. Whenever people ask me what editor should I use, I always tell them Resolve, and they're always usually surprised because they've never heard of it. But and it still blows my mind that the software is free. Like it's wild. As robust as that software is, I still can't believe it's free. Premiere, that's interesting. And I know Adobe has made some improvements on just in general for Mac. I know I think I read a month or two ago that they optimized, you know, some engines or whatever, so now the rendering is faster. I don't know, but for me, I have always had it wasn't even a love-hate relationship. It was just a hate-hate relationship with Adobe. Whenever they updated their software, it just never seemed to get better. Like with all the updates you roll out, you think your product would get better, but it just crashes all the time, and it just blew my mind. I've lost so many countless hours just struggling with that software. So 24 done right should not be choppy. I think it's people doing wacky things that make it feel that way. MKB. Yeah, that's it. It's always an interesting. I always remember him saying, you know, he tries to make things as lifelike as he can, and that's why he uses the red AK VistaVision, and you know, whatever. That's cool. I would agree with that. I you know, obviously that's why a lot of broadcasts. That's why they're using 30p and 60p. But you know. It's cool. It's really a personal choice, and that's his choice, and that's perfectly fine. But to say that 24 frames looks, I mean, obviously, if you jump back and forth between 24 and 30, like yes, it's going to look choppy because you're throwing out 6 frames. But if you're using 24 frames all the time, it's just going to look natural. So who knows? Who knows? Am I making graphics and lower thirds from scratch? No, I'm not. Usually, the production company I do a lot of work, I do a little bit of editing for. They have a whole graphics team, so I tell them like, hey, because they all are Adobe based. They all work in Premiere. A lot of people are still working in Premiere, which is fine. Use whatever you want to use. but I told them, I'm like, hey, if I'm going to start doing a little bit more editing for you, just send me, like, I know they work in After Effects, so just, because what they used to do is they would send me a motion graphics file from Premiere, and I'm like, hey, just send me an After Effects file, because I know my way around After Effects enough, so I can adjust the parameters and basically just give me the project file, I'll mess with it. So let's see. To this day, it still feels like beta software. Yeah, it's interesting I'll have to open up Premiere every once in a blue moon, and every time whenever I open it up, it looks so dated. It looks so clunky to me. Like, it looks like it's still stuck in the 90s or something. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But when you compare it to UIs like Resolve or Final Cut, yeah, Premiere just looks a little clunky to me. So, we'll see. Premiere, some workflow bugs that have been around for years. Yeah, and I know that for me, now that time code is kind of a big deal for me now. I don't know I don't know if they've improved that, because I remember a few years back when I was starting to get into time code. The time code workflow in Premiere was just really weird, and it didn't work. I don't think as well as it should have. So I don't know if they've either updated that, but again, that's another great thing about Resolve is that a lot of the time code features are just built in, and I can sync sound with right click, sync sound based on time code, and replace. It's incredible. I love what Resolve is doing there. Oh man, 9 to 5 using it every day. I would say if you can get out of that, if you can. Stuff with blue screen. Adobe is, and again, like now that I switched back to Mac in January, February, and like the optimization has just not been there. So that was always a big hurdle for me, is the optimization for Mac. So, Premiere I think works great on PCs. And again, I feel like they updated it a few months ago they maybe optimized it a little bit better using Metal or whatever. But I'm Resolve now. So the only thing holding you back is switching to Resolve is the restriction with customizing layout. I hear you. That was actually a big thing for me too. Because I would love me some, placing windows, and I used to have 3 monitors. I used to, utilize them all in Premiere. But it's actually kind of nice. Like right now, I'm basically using just 2 monitors side by side, and it's actually not as bad as you think. I think you get used to it after a while. If you want to, and you can obviously use a dual screen set. I don't know what your monitor situation looks like, but for my dual screen setup. It's kind of nice being able to know what to expect, especially since I'm editing off now. I'm doing a lot more editing off my laptop. I can go to a Windows PC and I can know what to expect. I don't have to dick around, because that was also another thing that I hated about Premiere, is that whenever it updated, for whatever reason, it would throw all my settings out the trash. Even though I told it to keep its settings in Creative Cloud, that never worked. So whenever I updated, I would always have to redo my windows, my keyboard shortcuts. So it's nice having the standard. It's nice having a standardized layout that's not dependent on your machine. So I got used to it. Maybe you will too. Yep, there's a good amount of wiggle room. If you want to get a window out of the way, you'll just untoggle it. If you want to bring it back, you just click it and it just comes back. And again, like I said, when you click it back, it comes back in the exact same space. And if you wanted scopes, I know there's different options to where you can bring up scopes. You can drag that window to a separate monitor if you wanted. So yeah, I think that would be a very small reason to keep you away from Resolve. And honestly, you just need to jump into it. You just need to force yourself, be like, hey, listen, from now on, I'm just going to start using Resolve. And that's what I did I did it for a lot of personal projects, but then for, a couple of editing jobs, by the time I got to actually editing for a job, I had already been editing on Resolve. I think I started editing some YouTube content on Resolve And so that way the stakes were a lot lower. But that's by that time when an editing job actually rolled around, I was comfortable enough to be proficient in editing. All the hotkeys and stuff, set up Premiere. Yeah, you can switch it. I know you can switch the keyboard layout to Premiere. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, just because when you do that, you'll start to miss out on some, like maybe some Resolve specific features that really do come in handy. It does take a while. It's interesting though. Whenever I use Premiere, I would use the Final Cut 7 hotkeys. So when I would just reset it to that. And Resolve is more like Final Cut 7 is. So the keyboard shortcuts were actually very, very natural for me, because it was actually kind of what I was already using. So there's that. How has my grading workflows changed since switching? I saw you posted a while ago. Yeah, so my grading workflow, I mean, obviously I do all my grading in Resolve, and it's incredible. I've learned so much more about just simple color grading than I ever did when I was using Premiere. I know a lot of people use Lumetri, and I don't know how it's improved over the years, but obviously Resolve has been an industry standard, so it's so nice having everything be condensed into all-in-one program, and that's why I love Resolve so much. I can go into Fairlight, record my voiceover, put some audio effects, do some audio editing, jump over to the color tab, do my entire grade, and then if I need to make any edits within the actual timeline, I can jump back to the edit tab. So it's just so streamlined. And a lot of people raise some eyebrows when I say that's my full-time editor, but over the past few years, I've noticed that Resolve has really made huge strides as a NLE. So it's been great having an all-in-one solution, and I love it. Resolve is great. Resolve is great. That's what I did. Cancel my Premiere subscription. That's awesome. Again, I don't know if I could let go of my Adobe subscription just yet. One thing I've not dabbled in is Fusion. I don't know how many of you guys use Fusion. That's the node-based workflow. It's really interesting, but all that stuff is way over my head. Even a lot of the stuff in After Effects, like I am by no means like I can deconstruct a project in After Effects and learn how to adjust things I need to adjust. But in terms of creating something from scratch, that's another story. And in Fusion, I need to just spend a month and just learn my way around that. And then I think once I do that, I might be able to let go of my Adobe subscription. But again, a lot of other companies, they'll use Premiere. They'll send me project files from Premiere or After Effects, and it's like, all right, well, I don't have an Adobe subscription. Like, what am I going to say? I don't have an Adobe subscription. So it's tough when the whole other industry is still stuck in Adobe's walled garden. There's also a lot of clients that ask you to. Yep. Exactly what I was saying. For me right now, I'm able to edit on whatever I want to edit on. I'm not doing a ton of editing work, which is great. The stuff I edit, I'm able to do with Resolve. So it's just on those occasions when those things more so happen when I'm working with another editor, or if another editor if I need to color a project edited in Premiere, which I still need to dial down that workflow a little bit more. But I'm able, for all the stuff I'm editing right now, I'm able to do it just right in Premiere. Let's see. Noblaze workflow is tough, but I'm slowly getting it. Yeah, it's beyond me. For me, the grading makes a little bit more sense right now, but I honestly, I just haven't touched Fusion at all. The confusion panel. Wow, you should patent that. That should make that into a shirt. You have your tabs at the bottom of Resolve, confusion panel. Yeah, no, Resolve is great, and that's another thing that I would love to eventually do with this series too. Is I have a home office that obviously I have my main editing workstation at, and so it'd be what I used to do a few years ago is I used to like live stream my edits to Facebook just so like friends could see like, you know, the inner workings of video editing and video production and stuff like that. I used to do live edits, so it would be cool to do something similar maybe for this, whether it be I'm working through a, you know, personal project or even just showing, you know, a basic workflow with grading or editing, because, you know, it's great. Color grading is very, very intimidating for a lot of people, and especially now with, you know, cameras like these. Log is, you know, for me, if I have the option, I'll always shoot log. And grading log, it can be intimidating for a lot of people. It was intimidating for me for a while, and then once I kind of stepped into Resolve, I kind of developed a workflow that kind of fits me pretty well. So it would be cool to do, you know, live demos like that, or editing streams further down the line. To be honest, I don't really use LUTs anymore. I know I make fun of LUT packs all the time, but when I was editing Premiere, whenever I would handle S-Log footage, usually I would slap on a technical LUT to get me in a basic Rec. 709, and then I would kind of grade from there. But now I just don't really do that at all. If I'm ever using an S709 LUT, it's usually just so client can see, like if I'm uploading a timeline, like day one footage, I'll just slap on an S709 LUT just so that they can see something that's not log. So I've actually come to really enjoying grading log, actually. And it honestly doesn't take too much time. It takes, you know, maybe a couple minutes to grade a shot. And usually I'm able to group them together, which is like, that feature from Resolve is just incredible. The grouping, like the pre-clip, post-clip, all that stuff. It's an incredibly streamlined workflow, and it'd be cool to maybe go over that in the future. Those streams were dope. Thanks, Michael. those were actually a while ago, so it's nice having someone that's been following for a minute. So it seems like you're still getting a lot of corporate work. Any speculations on how things will change? That's a really good question. So obviously a lot of companies and a lot of people have been pivoting lately. And not only that, like the people I was shooting with last night, Yukon Pizza, that was kind of born out of their own pivot in a sense, because all of those people, those were production people. Those were Steadicam operators. Those were kind of production coordinators. They were all doing production stuff and production work, and they would always be working. And obviously, pandemic hit, nothing. So at the time, Alex, the guy who kind of runs everything, he had owned this kind of pop-up pizza shop for a while, and then after that, he just kind of went full force into this business, and now is kind of letting go of film as his passion and just trying to grow this brand, and which is really cool. So a lot of people are pivoting, and a lot of people are doing live shows. So what I've seen is a lot of companies, a lot of corporate companies have been, obviously Zoom has been taking off. So what they're doing is they're kind of pre-recording their Zoom meetings and using the pre-record as a live stream so that it seems live. It's, you know, it's a live stream, but without all the flubs and the mistakes and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how and if, you know, real world stuff will pick back up. But it's so the repercussions of all of this stuff are going to be prevalent for years to come. So it's important for us to maybe for us to start pivoting as well. Like, you know, if you might have seen my video from a month or two ago where I piped in a camera feed into Zoom so the producers could see. So, you know, small things like that can really go a long way with, you know, getting business. And it's you know, wild times we live in, and you know, we have to adapt just like everyone else. But yeah, I think a lot of people are moving to the live format. I'm live right now. So it'll be interesting in seeing, and you know, Blackmagic, that A10 Mini has been flying off the shelves because everyone is doing more live content. So I think live is something that we should probably start focusing on and developing our live production skills a little bit more. It's something that I want to develop a little bit more. Like I have obviously a lot of live streaming gear, stuff that I'm using right now. But it would be, I think it would be handy to develop those skills a little bit more. Let's see. How would I compare the Vegas industry to something like Atlanta, LA, New York? So it's interesting. Vegas. So I'm going to speak from when things were a little bit more normal, like last year. So the Vegas industry, Vegas, you get a ton of corporate work, a ton of live events, a good amount of doc work, and a fair amount of commercials. Usually the commercials that will come into town, they're usually from LA, and oftentimes, they'll try to hire people from LA, which is wild. The film community in Vegas is very small and it's very tight knit. So that's one of the things I love about Vegas, is that Vegas is really, really a small town. Like you can be from one end to the other in 30 minutes. And the film community is even smaller. You usually know everyone in town. So like if you can name drop someone, it's like, oh, who shot that? Be like, oh, Dennis did, Rob did. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, I know, I worked with them before, which is good, which is nice because you know kind of who to stay away from. I'm obviously not going to say any names, but like everyone kind of has a general sense of who they like working with, who they don't like working with. Whereas I feel like in LA or New York or one of the bigger cities, you're always going to be working with someone different. So it's nice being able to have your expectations set whenever you're stepping on set. So it's nice whenever I get a call sheet in the night before, and then I see a bunch of familiar faces on the call sheet. So that's always super nice to have. And then going the other way too. Like if I see a name on the call sheet that I'm like, I don't particularly like working with this person, and that honestly does not happen a lot, but it gives me a chance to kind of mentally prepare for that. I should definitely show that workflow. I would love to see what I can take away to better my workflow. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about insight. Would love sharing mine. I hear a lot of people are raving about ACEs. I would like to from. Yeah, actually, Jeremy Lee, he was on the last stream. He is doing a ton of stuff in ACEs. So that's another thing I would like to do as well. I would like to bring him on this as a guest, and then we could even do a workflow session on how he works with ACEs. So it's in the works. Don't worry about it. Let's see. LumaFusion, Premiere. I have not used LumaFusion. I've heard about it plenty of times. I've never used it. Same thing is happening in NYC. Commercials seem like they're being picked up a little bit more now. It's going to be crazy times, and we're going to need to be flexible. Absolutely. It does seem like work is picking, like just in general, it does seem like work is picking up a lot more. People are getting antsy. People want things to open up. Things are opening up. You see places like Florida where they just lifted any kind of restrictions. So it's like, it'll be interesting seeing how, especially next year, because you have some events that have just straight up canceled well into next year, but then you have other events that are still on, like a music festival I do. Actually, I'm wearing a shirt right now, Life is Beautiful. Every year, they just announced tickets on sale for next year, which is like next September. So it'll be interesting in seeing how it'd be interesting in seeing just what the world is like fast forward a year. So yeah, I'm very interested. My small city is like yours. I feel like it's tough getting onto bigger gigs just because everyone has their go-to crew. Absolutely. How would you go about getting myself in the door for bigger gigs? Honestly, it's networking and who you know. That's basically 70 to 80% of the work is just who you know. I'm fortunate enough to know a good amount of people here in Vegas. I went to school here at UNLV through UNLV Film. And that was one of my big goals. That was one of my big goals for going to film school, is simply the networking. Like, I'm a very introverted person. And it's hard for me to kind of meet new people. So kind of film school kind of does that for you. And through that process, you're able to meet all kinds of different people through the industry, past graduates, classmates, stuff like that. So a lot of that is who you know and networking. So I know here in Vegas there are a handful of like film mixers. Pre all of this stuff happening, there would be like meetups and stuff like that. So if you're able to meet, and especially since you said that your city's kind of small, like Vegas, it might be worth it to see in what ways join Facebook groups. I know Vegas has a Facebook group, and yeah, just try to meet people. Try to meet professionals that are working, because if you work with them and they see you do good work, that's how I get the very, very big majority of my work is through, like I did a job a couple of weeks ago as an AC. If you saw my Teradek RT review, I mentioned I don't do a lot of AC work, but I actually do enjoy pulling focus. And my gaffer that I would do a lot of work with, he does a ton of work out here in Vegas, and he asked me, he was like, hey, do you want an AC for this thing? I was like, absolutely. So if you can meet and work with other professionals in your city, that does go a long way with stepping onto some of those bigger sets. So are your clients asking about? Nope, nobody's asking about HDR. I'm not even asking about HDR. I have not even got into that workflow yet. That's just a straight up no for me. 2021 burnout year, basically 3 times overbooked. Was that for you or just speculating? Or what's up, Christian? What's up, man? We got to get you on the stream too at some point. How you been? You been busy or what? Christian's another guy here in town in Vegas. He actually does pretty much all the video content for Jabberwockies, if you're familiar with them. So like all the video content, that's basically from Christian. Man, I need to do a video with the Jabberwockies at some point. That'd be killer. Any chance I'll do some work with the Las Vegas Raiders? So it's interesting. Actually, the people over at UConn that I was with last night, they are auditioning. They're trying out right now, I think, for to be a camera operator. So NFL Films has been hiring a lot of locals now, obviously. So they've just been sending all their gear out to all these different cities to hire out locals. So I've not been hit up for NFL Films, but my buddy Alex he's trying out, I think, this weekend to be a camera operator for all the home games, all the Raiders home games. I do know that the new Allegiant Stadium, I know they were looking for and I'm not sure what that looks like in terms of work, because I know NFL Films is its own separate entity, obviously with NFL, but I think there's also a video department at the stadium level. So I'm not sure what that relationship looks like, but I know they were looking, and I'm pretty sure by now they must have found someone. And I did consider about applying for that position. I think it was like a kind of production manager type position. But for me, I love shooting, so I know a lot of the requirements that they wanted you to make decks and pitch new video ID content ideas, all this stuff, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, I feel like I lack a lot of that creative vision. That's why I really like shooting, is because I usually lean on other people's visions and other people's direction, and I usually facilitate that on the acquisition end. So other than that, I don't know how much work with the Raiders I'll be doing. So I mean, we'll see. I don't know. Who knows? Wedding season. So it's interesting. Sounds like weddings are picking up a lot next year, because I think maybe 3 weddings booked this year. I don't do a ton of weddings, all obviously rescheduled. But it's interesting. I'm starting to see a little bit more weddings pop up now. I'll be interested in seeing how busy they are, like how what crowds will look like there. Quarantine has been heavy, but we are getting back to it. Yeah, we is. Yeah, man. Next time y'all shoot whatever, hit me up. Let's go. I'm super down. I made a spec ad for Vankyo headphones and want to send it to the company. What should I say in the email? It's a good question. I would send it over, and I would send it over with the hopes that, obviously, whether or not they like the direction that you went in the video, like I would just open a dialogue and just get some feedback from them. And it sounds like you probably want to sell it, but in the event that they don't like the video's direction or whatever, be like, all right, well, let's work something out. And if you're interested in video content, then what would you want to see in the video, rather, so that we can establish a relationship moving forward. I honestly haven't done too much spec ad work, and that's mostly because I'm just busy with other jobs. But that is the back to what I said earlier about not having so much of a that creative vision. That's why I generally have no interest in directing, because I usually lean on other people's creative vision. That navigating relationships with clients and all that stuff one does with a production as a production company, I usually don't do a ton of that, for better or for worse. I'm usually known as just a DP who, that's how I kind of market my company, is as a DP, not as a production company necessarily. So navigating emails and client relationships, that's a little bit of foreign territory for me. So I'm not sure if I can offer too much more insight than that. Can I make a video about your experience for UNLV? That, I was actually, a bunch of us UNLV folk were at Yukon Pizza last night, and a lot of us alum. So yeah, and then we were, talking the talk about our experiences at UNLV. Some good, some bad. I think now the film program has definitely changed since I've been there, and has obviously changed since a lot of my older colleagues have been there. I don't know that I would be able to recommend it right now. It's tough. It's tough because different people learn different ways. And like I said, I'm an introvert, so I kind of needed it forced upon me. I did do a series on whether or not you should go to film school. Some of it related to UNLV, some of it was more just universal. But if you haven't checked out that series, I did a few interviews with a couple of people I do some work with, and we basically talked about our experiences at UNLV and whether or not it would be worth it. The answer is it just depends, but that would be an interesting maybe a roundtable even. Just get a bunch of UNLV people together and just talk about our experiences. And yeah, I would love that. I went there for my undergrad. I went there for my undergrad. It would be cool to get my master's. I have thought about maybe going to AFI, but who knows? I think it's funny because after I graduated UNLV, I appreciate education a little bit more now that I'm out of it. So I think I would really come to appreciate going to school at AFI. It's just LA is a very, very hard sell for me. I really like Vegas. I've kind of struck a groove that I'm, I guess, maybe comfortable with. I get a good amount of work here, and if I have to take time off for school for 2 or so years, who knows? But on the other side of the spectrum, it might be worth it for the connections I make. And, that's obviously what I went to UNLV for. And it panned out pretty well. So, and obviously being in LA, you'll kind of be more in the thick of things. But, the LA dynamic, I don't know how many of you in the chat or how many of you end up watching this are from LA. But LA is interesting. LA is interesting. From what I've seen from people coming here to work from LA, they'll usually be more accepting of lower rates because the market is so saturated out there. So that's not something I'm particularly excited about if I did have to make the move out there to LA. It definitely wouldn't be permanent, I don't think, unless I'm like unless I have a success story like Morgan Cooper and I'm just a super big shot DP and then make the move out of LA, maybe, but who knows? I don't see that happening though. No more Waldman. Yeah, that's the one thing I will say. The biggest thing I got out of UNLV was my cinematography instructor, David Waldman, and he doesn't teach there anymore. So if I were to go to UNLV now, honestly, I don't know how much I would get out of it, except for obviously the networking. So, who knows? Maybe I know Carl, I think, is the new instructor there. I've never met him, but yeah, it would be interesting. I don't know what my experience would be like if I had to go there now, because Waldman, my cinematography mentor. He single-handedly changed my perspective on how I approach visual storytelling, and that did a lot for me, I think, for my career. So, risk versus reward. Yep, that's always a balance there. How do I make a contract when I finalize a project with a company? To be honest, I don't usually use a lot of production contracts when I'm working. To be honest, I don't do a lot of direct-to-client work. I used to when I was first starting out, but now it's usually production companies that are hiring me, and they'll send over paperwork to me. But when I was starting out, I know like Studio Binder, I know they have a lot of great templates that you could probably use, but it's important. I think the number one thing, though, regardless, is to kind of manage expectations. And clients obviously expect the world of you, and they have all these expectations. Like you see those memes where it's like they have this expectations for this. You're going to make a movie, but their budget is like pennies. So I think that's the number one thing that a contract will help with, is managing expectations. And I've finally especially regarding post, because post is where you'll spend a lot of your time usually in post-production, and it's important to know how to bill for that. So usually what I'll do is I'll bill hourly for that, and what I used to do is I just kind of build. I used to give them an estimate, be like, all right, maybe it'll be like 5 hours. Usually it never takes 5 hours. It takes way longer. So that's why I started actually tracking my time, billing hourly, and I wish I could give more insight on that. But I think managing expectations is where kind of contracts come in. So, if there's not anything else, that's about all I have. Again, I know this live stream is more so about the a7S, but I am planning on doing some latitude tests. If there are any specific a7S videos that you want to see, put them down in the chat. I have a whole list. I have a whole backlog of videos that I want to kind of hit through, and usually now that I'm starting to get a little bit more free time in the next week or so, I'll just try to bang them out all in one, so then I can just start releasing a little bit more. I'm trying to release videos on a weekly basis, and so hopefully I can stick with it. I've been pretty busy over the past few weeks, so hopefully I can keep that up. But I know the a7S III is going to be quite the buzzword for the next several months. So we'll see. Maybe I just need to start making clickbait titles and having Philip Bloom get angry with me. So yeah, actually, maybe to give you guys a little bit of an idea, one of the things, some of the videos that I want to do is obviously really quick, just kind of go over some stuff. One of the first videos I'm going to do is actually on Hedge. It's actually the backup software that I use to offload media. I don't know what your guys' workflow is with backing up media and offloading media, but if you're just dragging and dropping, you should probably do something a little bit more robust than that. Backing up media requires a little bit more than that, so that's why I use Hedge. I really like Hedge. I've been using Hedge for about 3 years, and it's great. They just released an update to where I can finally recommend their software. So that's one of the first videos I'll be doing. Obviously, a7S. I want to compare picture profiles. I want to do latitude test. I'm obviously going to be spending a good amount of time on this Yukon Pizza micro dock. And I would love to do a review on it. I actually really want to do a review on the FX9. But again, I don't like reviewing cameras, if I don't have a ton of time with them. If I haven't spent a lot of time with them, which is why I feel like I'm finally comfortable in just now doing an FX9 review. And that's the one thing I always hate seeing YouTubers do is, they'll get the camera in and, if you're first, you're last. If you're not first, you're last. So they'll get the camera in. They'll just, I got my review. We're going to take a look at some cinematic footage. I shot this footage of a fountain in my backyard. All right, now here's my full thoughts. It's not a review. You have to put the camera through its paces, put it in some production environments, use it on a few jobs. What is it like using this camera in the real world? I want to explore Sony's new color science. I want to see how well these two cameras match from the a7S to FX9, FX6, whenever that comes out. Apparently it's coming out by the end of the year, so I don't think I'll buy one, but I think I need to figure out how to get my hands on one. I need to be in Sony's good graces. Maybe they'll send me one. That would be awesome. And again, how changing ISO to FX dynamic range. So, yep, other than that, that's about all I have. More content. Yep, that's some of the stuff that you can probably expect in the next few months. So, also talk about what you use to back up. Yep. So I'll talk about Hedge. Hedge is great. I'm going to try emailing them. I'm actually going to see if I can get a copy to do a giveaway. So that'll be cool. Thanks for everybody for coming in and tuning in and checking this out. This was kind of cool. I've always wanted to do some sort of ongoing stream. So whether this is on a weekly or bi-monthly basis, we'll see. I'll plan for now. I'll maybe plan to do another one next Saturday. Thanks everybody for stopping by. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.